Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to our second edition of NASCAR, where we talk all things mid-major college hoops. My name is Nick Pierce, joined, as always, by our experts, Paul Nazigan and Tim Scarborough. Together, they are Naz and Scar. And this week, we've got a lot to get to. We talk all mid-major college hoops, as I said, even the West Coast Conference, except for Gonzaga. They do not count. We established that last week if you were with us. So we got a lot to get to on the show, as I said. We've also got our second part of our conversation with former coach Jeff Meyer to get to. So, guys, let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's get to the starting five here this week. And first up, COVID cancellations. Mike Krzyzewski canceling the remainder of Duke's non-conference ball games. Scar, what's your take?
Well, I think it's the right decision for them. Every team has to coach his own team. I'll say that. Nate Oates, the head coach of Alabama, took some shots at Coach K. We could talk about that. But, he apologized for it. But I understand both sides of it, right? If Coach K was winning, he probably would be less reticent to quit, right? Because he'd want to keep going. His team was on a roll. But we talked about this last week. It's really hard to prepare your team when you didn't have a preseason. And as a result, some of these teams, Kentucky, Duke, they're off to rugged starts. And the other thing, they don't have any fans in the audience. So there's no advantage to playing in your arena because your arena is empty. So, but safety is always a concern. I'm on the very conservative side of this. I'm not even doing most of the college basketball games I would be doing throughout the course of a college basketball season because I don't want to travel with the way COVID is. So I understand it.
Yeah, and I don't fault Coach K because, rule number one as a coach, you look after your kids. You got to do what's best for your team. And if he felt that was the best thing to do, then you can't really fault him. Every coach knows their situation best. Scar, I'm a little bit on the other side of the COVID argument. I just really feel like if you can play, you should try to play because I don't know that canceling makes you any safer unless you're going to take your team to some kind of bubble situation where it's the dorm to team meals to the gym. But if you're letting guys kind of go out on their own at times, I don't know that it makes you safer. And then I really just am kind of tuned into the social and emotional wellness of kids. And I think it's taken a toll on them. And I just think the more games they can play, life just feels normal. We remember, just the best thing you had at that age was getting out on the court and hooping. So it's a tough argument. And again, I think like we both agree on, you got to just kind of do what's best for your situation.
Agreed.
Yeah, certainly tough times and tough decisions to be made out there, no doubt about it. Number two on our starting five, quirky conference formats. And we've seen a lot of these, Naz, teams playing back-to-back days. I know the A-Sun is doing that and a few others as well. What do you make of this?
Yeah, again, trying to make the best of it. I think there's some advantages to safety and only traveling to half the places in your conference. But it poses some problems. You're talking back-to-back games with not a lot of time to prepare or make any kind of changes. Injuries, if you get somebody dinged up, then they're 24 hours later you're back on the court. But again, conferences are trying to do the best they can. That seems to be one of the popular ones.
Yeah, and the other thing that it introduces is you don't get some teams that come to your place. And obviously, we just talked about really there isn't a home court advantage anymore anyway because most places don't have fans. But still, playing in the confines of your own environment where you're used to the rims, you slept in your own bed that night.
Yep.
Now you got to play 2 home games in a row. That's always good for you. But sometimes you got to go on the road and play 2. So it's just going to produce an imbalance in terms of the conference standings, in my opinion, because it's really hard to turn around. That's why, they do it in baseball. And Nick, you cover a lot of baseball. You play 2, 3, 4 games in a row, and it's hard to sweep a team, So you got that whole baseball, basketball imbalance, 2 different sports, but we rarely play basketball against the same team 2 nights in a row. So it's a real adjustment for the college coaches. It's going to be interesting to see who can bounce back on that Saturday after losing on the Friday.
Yeah.
What changes really, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, now one thing we mentioned here as we move on to 3 in our starting 5 is there's certain conferences we don't talk about. Now, typically the Mid-America Intercollegiate Athletic Association is not one of the ones we would cover on this podcast, but in this case we will, as Division II Fort Hays absolutely stunned Kansas State, winning on their home floor, leading wire to wire, and winning by double digits, guys. Come on.
And that's crazy to me. You know, that hasn't happened. A non-Division One hasn't beaten a Power Five on their floor since December of 2000. So it's been a long time. It doesn't happen regularly, but we're living in a different time. And you got to feel for Coach Bruce Weber and the Kansas State team, you know, in Manhattan. Things are not looking good for them, losing 81-68 to a team. And by the way, that team didn't have its top coach or its top assistant because of COVID-19. So just a wacky story.
Yeah, and, you know, Coach Weber, you know, he apologized to the fan base. And, you know, I don't know, I think he went a little overboard on that. I mean, these things happen. I mean, they make college basketball exciting. It was 20 years ago. You know, I don't know. I mean, you have to say something and you work hard. But I think he kind of beat himself up a little bit too much.
You know, Fort Hays, they also lost their first 3 Division II games to the power Washburn, Emporia State, and Nebraska Kearney. So
you're killing Bruce Weber.
Yeah, I just maybe he didn't. Maybe he needed to go that hard on himself.
big bounce back win there for Fort Hays. Let's move on here. Number 4 in our starting 5. NCAA transfer rules could be changing, and they could be changing soon, granting all student athletes immediate eligibility upon transferring. This didn't set too well with a few coaches out there. Guys, what do you make of the transfer rules potentially changing mid-season?
Yeah, well, you know, the comment comes from Jim Larinaga on the heels of a nice mid-major upset. Florida Gulf Coast took down Miami. So, you know, he was a little bit upset, I think, of that, but he's right. Listen, he's right on the fact that you got something as important as the transfer rule and the ripple effects of the numbers of people that's going to impact. And we're sitting around and don't have a decision on it. And if a decision comes, it's going to come mid-season, as if we needed one more thing in this crazy year to have happen. So I'm with Coach Larinaga on that one. The timing of it is really bad.
Scar,
I'm with them too. Yeah, I'm with them too on the timing. But the thing is, there's already a wild, wild west with the transfer portal. The transfer portal is full of good players now. It used to be guys that didn't play at the end of the bench. They want to get some playing time. Now you got guys in there that are all conference players, guys averaging 15, 20 points a game, and they're still in that transfer portal. So it's already a wide open thing. So in my opinion, if you make that decision to make them not redshirt, which they're granting waivers left and right anyway, I say, let's go for it. Let's make it. If you transfer, you can play right away. I like the rule.
And I like it's a one-time thing, so that's good. So it's not just guys can't bounce to, 4 places. But yeah, I'm with you, Scar. It's a good thing.
All right, rounding out our starting 5 here this week, number 5, and it's simply a question: who wins this week? Who wins the SoCon? Scar, who do you got?
I love this segment. I think we should do this every week, different conferences. And this week is the SoCon. One of my favorites. I think it's a top 3 or 4 conference in the country in terms of mid-majors. When you look at the standings, though, I mean, it's kind of topsy-turvy right now with, Chattanooga being at the bottom in terms of, East Tennessee State being at the bottom. I think they're going to be one of the better teams. They got a new coach, so they may hit some bumpy roads. Mercer was picked in the top 4. Mercer is one of the better mid-major teams, and Greg Gary has them really going in his second year coming there from Purdue. He's got a fifth-year senior and Ross Cummings that is really a preseason all-conference player. I still believe in Greensboro. Wes Miller, Isaiah Miller, probably the best player in the Southern Conference. So I think Greensboro, Mercer, and Furman will all be in the mix. If gun to my head, I'm going to go with the Mercer Bears.
All right, that's good. I can't argue with that. The standings are interesting. And just as I look at those, you got Scar, you and I were talking about this. some of scheduling is coaching philosophy, and you see some guys, Citadel's 5-0, Western Carolina 6-1. You got some guys that need some wins for their young teams, and so they kind of go out and schedule some little different later opponents early. So that you can't tell a whole lot from some of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right on with Greensboro, Furman, Mercer being up near the top. I'm with you. This is a tough decision. We knew the SoCon was going to be tough. They have been for several years. And so they really got it rolling down there. I guess if I had to make a call, I liked them last week. I'm going to stay with the Furman Paladins. I think they're going to pull it out. Coach Bob Ritchie got it rolling, and I think they're in for some great stuff this year.
All right, that'll wrap it up for our starting five here this week, and I can't wait to see what we got out there next week. But for now, let's move on to our NASCAR Mid-Major Top 25 here this week. Looking forward to seeing the movement here as we take a look at numbers 1 through 12 in the top 25 here this week. Scar, not a whole lot of movement really, except for in the top 5. Richmond, it took a double-digit loss to West Virginia on Sunday.
And not a lot of movement in the top 5. That's because me and Scar know what we're talking about.
Hey, we nail it every week.
That's right. Yeah. So, Richmond loses, they bump down, but they lose to number 8, West Virginia, who is just a phenomenal team. So, yeah, a lot of things staying put up in that upper half.
Yeah, Scar, what about VCU? They jump out there into as well, jumping inside the top 10 now at number 8.
Yeah, I like VCU at number 8. And, they had a good win on Saturday. They're just a gritty team, a very young team. Coach Mike Rose has really got them going. They're athletic, play with a ton of energy. And, of course, a lot of that defensive energy that they bring converts at the other end and transition opportunities. A really fun team to watch.
Let's move on. Look at numbers 13 through 25 here. Naz, Belmont, Furman, they're moving up here. What do you think?
Yeah, they're both teams 5-1. We talked about really good programs. Just a kind of just a really winning culture, and we bumped them up a little bit, and we're still riding them.
Scar, looking at the lower part of the top 25 here, you got UAB, Western Carolina. They move inside the top 25. Also, Abilene Christian, you guys have them down there at number 25 at 5-1.
Yeah, it's good to see them jump in there. They took a close loss, really, to Texas Tech, who's one of the better teams in the country, one of the best Power Fives out there. But you look at UAB, Andy Kennedy going back to his alma mater where he played at UAB. They're going to be a force to reckon with in Conference USA. They got a lot of transfers, a kid from Clemson. They still have Taven Lovin and freshman, second-year guard and Benjamin. So they got some players there that look for them to really compete with Western Kentucky, I should say, in Conference USA.
Well, we got some teams moving into the top 25 this week. Of course, that means some teams are on the way out. Austin Peay took a loss to Murray State their last time out. South Dakota State lost to South Dakota, I think, last Saturday. And then Stephen F. Austin out as well after a loss to number 2 Baylor. Well, that's a look at the top 25 here this week. It's time to move on to our next portion of the show, our Coach's Conversation. And this week it's part 2 of our conversation with former coach Jeff Meyer, longtime assistant at the University of Michigan, and, of course, success at the mid-major level as well, taking Liberty to the big dance in 1994 and a number of years spent at Butler, where he just recently retired. So part 2 of our Naz and Scar conversation with former coach Jeff Meyer.
That's awesome. It's great hearing you tell those stories about those guys that are in the league now. It's amazing, Coach. You've coached some great players along the way. Hey, I want to take you back to your Liberty days. I'm still calling games for Liberty, and people see Liberty now, and they're on the map, and they think. I think a lot of people just sort of think it was always like that. But Scar and I know better. Scar and I know who brought them out of obscurity, and I want you to talk about those days, Coach. Taking over a tiny, unheard of Christian college to where you left it, as we mentioned earlier, the 94 NCAA championship. You were the guy that put Liberty basketball on the map. Talk about those days. What was special for you? What do you remember back from those days?
Well, I appreciate that, Paul. This is it's kind of I look back on that time. That was a lifetime ago, as you well know. But I look back on it, And, I had several players from our first 5 or 6 years at Liberty. That was kind of the foundational years when we were NAI Division II. And several of those guys have stayed in touch. They, several of them came to a Butler game. The last couple of years came to Butler games. You guys were more of the, what I call, if those were foundational years and foundational part of the experience, you were in the transitional year from Division II to Division I. Yeah. And wow, did we log some miles in a bus?
A lot of road games. A lot of road games.
We were busing to Florida. We were busing to Niagara. I think we bused to New York City, played Brooklyn and New York City.
Yeah.
That was crazy. What were we doing? Get home at 4:00 in the morning and say, you guys get to class now.
That's
I know
right.
you got at 8 o'clock.
Yeah. Oh, brutal.
Yeah. But you guys were just really, really instrumental in the transition years. And then, of course, once we were able to get into the Big South, that become, that final stage of my time at Liberty where we kind of turned it around. We had some pretty good Big South teams. And so, but those years were tremendous years, Naz. I mean, we had, obviously it was a time where our family kind of grew up, and Lynchburg's a great place for to raise a family, as you well know. You both well know that. It's very, very good, family-friendly environment. The other thing about being at Liberty, though, that kind of prepared, Paul, you talked a little bit about being in the Big Ten. The people of Liberty, they want to win, so every day, and not that they don't at other places, but they want to win as bad as the people in West Lafayette want the Boilers to win. Now, people in Liberty, the Mountain, they want their guys to win. So there's always that underlying deal of, we better make sure we got a good team, a good product on the court. And so you guys helped with that. But the Liberty experience, looking back on it, really created a coaching experience and a coaching foundation through relationships that has literally lasted a lifetime. Because I was at Liberty, I met Greg Marshall. I was at Liberty, we met John Beilein. Because of the success we enjoyed at Liberty, Todd Licklider reached out to me when I was at Winthrop and said, you want to come back home to Butler? And then of course my experience at Butler was tremendous also, in terms of just allowing me to meet people, to grow. As you mentioned, Scar, the game is so much different now than it was when we were at Liberty. We played pretty good man-to-man defense, threw in a little matchup zone once in a while. But we were basically a motion offense team. You guys remember the blockers and the movers, and that's
Right.
And I'm sure Richie's using that a little bit.
Yep.
We did the open, the Bob Huggins open motion offense, 5 out, and we ran about 5 or 6 actions, maybe after a timeout, to get one of our big kids, Julius Nwasu, or maybe Peter Luma.
Yes, sir.
The late great Peter Luma. How sad was that to lose him?
Man.
And Keve's doing great at Virginia Tech. How about that?
Yeah. Ace Custis told me back in January, Ace is on staff there at Virginia Tech. I went to watch them play Syracuse on my way up to watch Liberty. And Ace said, Keve might be the best player on our team. He was redshirting. And, man, he is not disappointing. But you saw him at Wofford. Of course, we're a mid-major podcast, and Paul and I cover mid-major teams and watch it. And Wofford, when Keve was there and they had Fletcher McGee, who was the all-time leading three-point shooter in the Southern Conference, even more threes than Steph Curry hit, even though Steph only played 3 years at Davidson. But, and Keve was a big part of that. They ran the table. You know how hard it is to run the table at any level. And you've coached at the mid-major, you've coached at the Big 10, the Big 12. It's hard to win every game. You mentioned going on the road in conference is very tough. But yeah, I'm very proud of Keve being a second-generation Liberty guy over at Virginia Tech.
We got matched up with Wofford when I was at Butler in 2014, the NCAA tournament. We played them right out of the gate, and they gave us everything. We went to the Elite Eight that year. They gave us everything we could possibly want in the first round game.
Mike Young, heck of a coach.
Yeah.
And he's done a tremendous job. And there's a guy that, was started out as an assistant at Wofford and stayed the course. Richard Johnson ended up going into the administrative chair, and Mike got an opportunity, did a great job with it. He runs some really good stuff offensively. But in terms of the game changing, when I got to Butler, we started using the ball screen offense. Of course, you'd seen it in the pick and roll. You'd seen it with, Stockton, Malone, and you'd seen it a little bit with the NBA. And then how has that changed the game, guys?
It is the game.
It's everywhere.
Listen, as a guard, I didn't have to navigate that minefield behind me. We didn't have a big post player on either side of you, and you got to get through the screen, and you got a post stepping out and hedging. We didn't have to work. Now, we had a couple sets where we did that with Bailey Austin and me, where it was a ball screen. He'd go right. If he couldn't turn the corner, he'd pitch it back to me, and I'd go left because I like to go left. And we'd score out of that sometimes, but it wasn't the whole offense like it is now. I mean, my goodness, it's unbelievable how the game has evolved. Yeah. So, Coach,
it really has. And of course, you mentioned.
Yeah,
go ahead. You mentioned the 3-point line and how that changed it back in the, in the 80s. But the shot clock running, is now at 30. That went from 45 to 35.
45.
To 30.
Yeah, that's right.
And you played when it was like 45, I believe.
Yeah. That's like that's an eternity. It's a long time. So let's let Coach get out with a quick couple of spitfire questions, all right? And we'll end it.
Before I get out now, I got to tell you, I do remember you two guys as players. I do know that. All right, you mentioned Bailey Austin. I think you and Bailey went for 50 one night. I think he had like 42, and you had 8.
That was most nights.
After the game, Scar, you were talking about your 50 piece. I didn't figure that one out.
I like to take credit for Bailey Austin's 2,000 points in 3 seasons. Yeah. I mean, that was an incredible performance by him. And you mentioned when I was a player, he and I had similar skills and we played the same position. It's the reason I learned how to play point guard because we were in the same class. So I knew I would never see the court as long as Bailey Austin was in that program. So, I was smart enough to say, let me learn some new positions here if I'm going to get on the court under Jeff Meyer.
And we told Chaz to get back, cover the basket in transition because he couldn't get an offensive rebound anyhow. Right. Bailey was like, you and Bailey were our best rebounders. You were our guard.
Oh yeah, but we leaked out the other end. Oh boy, we gave up layups because we're both crashing. Nobody's covering the basket. Yeah.
And then I think about Naz. Naz is the ultimate glue guy. He doesn't start. He doesn't start. But every time to finish a game, who was in there? Paul Nazigan. He was in there.
Had to have him. And our senior year, we won our last 6 games. Yeah. And you started Paul at the end of the year.
Finally, you got into my head a little bit, didn't you? Listen, you said, hey, what's up with this, Coach?
I would, Paul, you don't know this, but I lobby for you all the time. Like, you got to get Naz in there because, you need glue guys. Like you said, we had scorers, guys are going to put shots up. Yeah. Naz could play and not take a shot and affect winning. And I was like, hey, we got to get him in there. So
I think that team, the big thing with that team is he could at least inbound the ball without turning it over. It was always a challenge. Get the ball inbounds.
Wow, man, you bring
go ahead, Scott. I just wanted to let your listeners know who they were dealing with on these podcasts.
That's good stuff. All right, Coach, we'll let you out there. We'll give you a couple of spitfire questions. My first one is, who's the best player you ever coached? I know that's tough. We mentioned a lot of good ones in Michigan and IU. It might be Bailey Austin. It might be Tim Scarborough. I
don't know. Those guys are really good. You know what? And you don't like to put people out there because of comparisons. I mean, it's
hard.
Different players have different skill sets. So I don't know. Obviously we could pick out a starting 5. I might have to put Julius Nwasu at the center on that starting 5 team because he was really, really talented. he's still upset with me because I didn't let him shoot threes. You know, he said, "Jew, get inside, Jew. That's where you're going to do your best." But certainly, Eric Gordon, and Trey Burke were special players. Trey ended up being college player of the year.
True.
And, and then, follow that up with a Nick Stauskas, who was Big Ten player of the year and first team All-American. So I don't know. There isn't just a one best. There were some just really, really good players that kind of had the opportunity and made the most of the opportunity when it came their way. Scar.
Go ahead, Naz.
All right, just here's a fun one. Just and you don't have to mention names, but what's the one team, any level that you were at, any league that you were at, the team you just hated to play? Who did you, of all the teams and conferences you were in, who did you just hate? And again, we won't mention players or coaches or anything like that, but what team would you just regretted seeing?
Well, when we were in at Liberty, we hated playing Radford, didn't we?
Yeah.
We did not like playing Radford.
Couldn't beat
You know
them.
what's kind of interesting? This is kind of interesting now. Mike Eads, Roger Ayers, Jamie Lucky,
Yeah.
all these guys like started in the Big South.
Duke Etzel.
Yeah.
Duke
And we were doing the Big South. Yeah, and of course Carl Hess, the great Liberty great. But what was funny, after we were playing Arkansas in the NCAA tournament a couple years ago, we were at Butler. We had Roger Ayers, and Roger Ayers comes over. We're in a tight game. I'm talking about, we got out on them early. It was like 19-4, but they came all the way back. And I think it was the under 8 timeout. I go out and asked him about a call that he made. He said, "Hey, this isn't any different than Radford Liberty." I said, "Wow,
That's awesome.
yeah."
Great.
So, you know what was interesting is we had Carl Hess in the Kansas game when Trey Burke hit the iconic shot from about 35 feet to tie the game.
Yep.
And we ended up going to the Final Four, but Carl Hess was on that game, which is kind of, Duke Etzel was he was the fourth guy. He was on the bench as the alternate official. But, places you hate to go. When I was at Purdue, we hated Indiana. But you know what? I was at Indiana. I hated Purdue.
Don't you have a degree from Purdue?
I do. Yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy.
And when you're in Michigan, I tell you what, going to the Breslin, you better have some thick
Michigan
skin,
State.
because you're going to hear everybody calling you names. It was crazy. So we did not like Sparty when we were at Michigan.
That's great.
And now at Butler, we don't like Xavier. So that's a pure hatred too. So you always have that rivalry, Naz, that kind of stimulates your competitive juices. No question about it.
Awesome.
All right, well, Coach, we'll let you get out of here. We appreciate you joining us on our inaugural broadcast.
Well,
Thank
it has been my pleasure. I'm so proud of you guys. I hope this goes well. If I can ever be of any encouragement or help to you all, don't hesitate to connect with me. And, this basketball season's unique with the cancellations, the postponements. The coronavirus is just playing havoc with the game. But I'm going to sit back like you guys and kind of enjoy the games I can watch. And I know at the end of the day, the one thing we can all bank on, there will be an NCAA tournament this year, one way or another. So, but we appreciate it. It's great to catch up with you guys.
Yeah,
All right,
Coach. Thanks for coming on, but not just for coming on, but we just have such a great history where I know I can speak for Scar. We're always appreciative for you and what you've done for us. You gave us our start in coaching, and it's just great to see your success, and congratulations in retirement.
Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it.
And a big thanks again to former coach Jeff Meyer for joining us on NASCAR. All right, let's get back to it here. NASDAQ, one of my favorite segments of the show. He's not going to make you any smarter when it comes to buying stock portfolios, but hopefully you'll learn a thing or two about college hoops. All right, Naz, we got some interesting topics to get to here this week. Let's start with San Diego State. Stock up or stock down, Naz? What do you say?
Oh, that's stock up. Stock up, man. They are rolling. I mean, here's a team that last year, I mean, they were getting ready to make a a deep run into the tournament. You know, probably we're going to get a 1 seed or a 2. They come back this year. Again, they are tough. You saw they beat Arizona State there and gave Hurley some heartburn. But Coach Brian Dutcher, I mean, he's been there for over 20 years as an assistant, takes the program over, just has them back. Again, success, recruiting, great place to play. This year they got wins over, you know, we mentioned Arizona State, but also UCLA. So, I mean, these guys are for real. It's a stock buy.
They're the best team in the Pac-12, right?
Yeah.
They beat everybody they play in the Pac-12.
And here's the thing,
you know, and they lost Malachi Flynn too.
Yeah.
Malachi Flynn to the NBA. So that's a really good job of coming back this year.
And that kind of leads into my next one, because I was going to have stock down because the coaches poll didn't have them in there. And that was giving me some problems. I was going to start looking like Hurley. I was going to have that face like, how can you leave these guys out of the top 25? But they got him in there. They deserve to be in there. So coaches poll, you're off the hook there with I don't have to mark you down. And then my third stock tip is a stock up. It's Boise State and head coach Leon Rice. Man, what a story out there. He's a Mark Few disciple. He spent 11 years with Mark Few there at Gonzaga. We will mention Gonzaga in this regard because it's a great program.
Careful now.
Coach Few literally every day. I mean, there's a great relationship there, and he comes out of a great program, and he has had great success at Boise State. Listen, 8 20-win seasons, 5 postseason appearances. And here's the thing, they do a great job, as you have to at the mid-major level, of player development.
That's going to do it for NASDAQ. Naz, you got your office cleaned up on Wall Street yet? All right, just checking. Let's move on here in NASCAR to our next segment. This is Scarborough fair or unfair?
All right, here we go.
All right, so let's get to it, Scar. We already talked about Coach K once here tonight. Cancellation of Duke's non-conference schedule. Scarborough fair or unfair? Duke is done playing non-conference basketball this year.
That is Scarborough fair to Duke fans because they want to get into ACC play, but it's Scarborough unfair to the Gardner-Webbs and the other teams that they would have played, because people understand this, that there's money involved in that. When you cancel those non-conference games, that's a 6-figure check that school is not going to get. So it's Scarborough unfair to the teams that don't get to play Duke this year.
Yeah, Scar, you spent plenty of time around the Big South Conference. You know what that means to Charleston Southern and Gardner-Webb. I mean, that's a really tough
everything.
break. Yeah. Scarborough fair or unfair? The Pit in New Mexico, the best mid-major venue in the country.
You know, at a time, the Pit was one of the best venues, period, in the nation, let alone mid-major. But, you know, I did a game there last year. It was almost sold out. The kids at VCU and kids at Dayton and other places like that, to me, have kind of leapfrogged the Pit at New Mexico. But that's still a great venue to do a game and watch a game and play a game. But to me, it's no longer the premier. So I'm going to say that's Scarborough fair.
Next up, I can probably guess the answer to this one, but I'll ask it anyway. Scarborough fair or unfair? Number 2, Baylor. Number 1, Gonzaga. Canceled.
Well, that is clearly Scarborough unfair to Tim Scarborough, because that was the game I was looking forward to. We may not consider Gonzaga a mid-major, and we consider them a major, number 1 in the nation versus number 2, Baylor. And I pull for Gonzaga. I love that team. I just don't think they're a mid-major, but it's no disrespect to Mark Few's group. They got some great players. You know, we talked about Jalen Suggs. You know, they have NBA level talent year in and year out these days. That would have been a great matchup. That is Scarborough unfair that we didn't get to see that.
All right, last but not least, Scarborough fair or unfair? Luka Garza from Iowa. He's the best player in the country.
You know, about 6 or 7 months ago, I would have said that was Scarborough unfair because Obi Toppin from Dayton was clearly the best player. But Luka Garza last year was right there with him, and he was a runner-up for Player of the Year. But this year, it is Scarborough fair to say he is the best player in the country, averaging nearly 30 points a game, shooting almost 70% from the field. He had 30 at halftime of a game this year. He is pretty much a 7-foot machine right now, unstoppable at both ends, patrolling the paint. right now, Luka Garza is running away with National Player of the Year, and deservedly so. And Iowa's a really good team as well.
Pride of Washington, D.C., Luka Garza getting it done on the court so far this year. That'll wrap it up for Scarborough Fair or Unfair. All right, fellas, here we go. Final lap. Let's get ready.
Zoom.
VCU Old Dominion. Scar, what do you think about that matchup?
Man, first of all, I live in Atlanta now, plus it's COVID, so that's 2 strikes. There's no way, but I would have been at that game. That is a game that I love to watch. Too bad for ODU. They got rolled by VCU. That's a great rivalry. ODU now in the Conference USA, VCU in the Atlantic 10, but it's nice that those coaches still get together and play that game.
Naz, Kentucky's 1-4. What do you make of that?
Oh, I don't make too much out of it. Listen, Big Blue Nation, though, the sky is falling. It's over. Their egos are bruised. But listen, let me tell you something. It's exactly what they need. Coach Cal knows that those guys are a little bit full of themselves. You know, Scar, you'll remember this phrase we used to use: fat cats don't fight. The ones that are well-fed, they're not scrapping and clawing. I think the Wildcats had a little bit of that. These guys come in so highly touted, and this is exactly what they need to get them hungry and humble.
Yep.
Well, Naz, I'll stick with you. Some big games coming up this week, but what are you keeping your eyes on?
Yeah, you know, again, it's day to day, literally. But Friday night, we got a great A10 matchup. Davidson goes into Rhode Island. That should be a war. Hopefully, it takes place.
Yeah, that's what we say about every game. It feels like you're in 2020. Last one here. Scar, I'll come to you on this one. Not a mid-major player, but certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to Keontae Johnson. Very scary incident the other day, collapsing on the floor for Florida. Young man that had COVID-19, but just your thoughts on Keontae Johnson.
Yeah, and your heart goes out to Coach Mike White, good friend of mine. He used to coach at Louisiana Tech when I still cover Conference USA. And, you know, I follow that Florida team because Mike is such a good guy. But, you know, your heart goes out to the family of Keontae Johnson. He's been moved to a different hospital. He's in a medically induced coma. So our thoughts and prayers certainly from the NASCAR podcast to them.
Yeah, so scary. And thoughts and prayers out to his family and everyone involved there at the University of Florida, no doubt about it. Well, we end on a somber note here this week, but we thank you so much for joining us here on the NASCAR podcast. High speed action without all the pit stops and crashes. Of course, you can find us NASCAR podcast on YouTube. That's where our episodes live each week, or on Twitter at NASCAR podcast. That is NAZSCAR podcast. For Paul Nazigan, for Tim Scarborough, for our engineer and producer, Shaq Cook, my name is Nick Pierce. Thanks so much for joining us. Till next time,